Hi, the Mudbrooker here. You may have noticed the Italian name in the title of this video. That's because YouTube's gotten really weird about the things they will and won't allow for a title and in a video. But what I'm making today is Nipples of Venus. And before we start, the first and most important ingredient in any recipe is of course alcohol. And today I'll be having some bourbon. This is Bolete bourbon, or Boulet, however you want to pronounce it. And you'll be seeing this again. I would like to thank my supporters on Patreon. Kay's Kist, Benedict Riggers, Joy Jones, Damian Bamer, Leo, Theodore Engelke, Valentin Tolman, Rudy Valvano, Kiasby, John Wheeler, Sherry Lynn, CJ, and Sarah. Here's to you guys. Your support is greatly appreciated. That's good. Anyway, Nipples of Venus are an Italian candy traditionally made with cognac and ground chestnuts as a filling mixed with melted chocolate, which is then dipped in white chocolate. I don't really care for chestnuts. I am not a big fan of the taste, and they're pretty expensive. They're easy to find this time of year because it's almost Christmas. But most times of year you can find canned or vacuum packed chestnuts, but like I say, they're expensive as hell. What I use is hazelnuts, and for this recipe I'll need an 8-ounce bag, which is a little under 2 cups measured out before you grind them. You want to grind these as fine as you can, but you don't quite want to make hazelnut butter out of them. You can also use pecans in this recipe. They're really good, but they're a bit oilier and they tend to want to turn into pecan butter. If it does get a little bit, buttery on you, that isn't going to hurt, but you don't really want to liquefy these things. So anyway, I'm going to grind these up and get my, that goes the other way, get my ancient old food processor going, which is fighting me for some reason. Anyway, I'm going to grind these up. I forget how to use this thing. I'm going to grind these up and I'll be right back. This works a whole lot better when you don't try and put the lid on backwards. I let this run for about a minute or so, and you can tell when it's about done when it starts to kind of clump up around the sides. I'm not sure if you can really see that, but you can see it's clumping up around the sides, and that's usually a sign that your ground is fine as you need to be. And looking through there, I don't see any stray bits or pieces that aren't pretty well powdered. I'm going to grind it just a little bit more, and I'll have to stir it down the sides a little bit, but we're getting pretty close to where it has to be. Yeah, those are ground nice and fine, and those will work just perfectly. Alright, my nuts are all ground up. So what I do now is I take 1/3 cup of sugar and 5 tablespoons of softened butter. And I cream them together. And once I got those reasonably creamed together, that ain't bad, I'll add my ground nuts, start mixing them around. A 1/4 cup of bourbon or brandy, you can use either. A pinch of salt. A little dash of either hot sauce or cayenne pepper. Might seem a little counterintuitive putting something hot in a candy, but a little bit of pepper or heat of some sort really brings out the flavor of chocolate. I'm going to add a teaspoon of vanilla. This is homemade bourbon vanilla. looks like about enough. Set that aside. And we'll get this all mixed together good. My butter is getting stuck to my spatula a little bit. And finally, I'm going to add 6 ounces of melted dark chocolate. This is a 60% cacao dark chocolate, but anything from 56 to 70%, depending on your taste, will work. You don't really want to use milk chocolate. It's a little bit too sweet, and you want to have more of a bittersweet dark chocolate taste to the filling. These little bits back in there, and mix her up good until everything is well incorporated. This is just a little bit sloppy, but it's not too bad. I think this will work. And it's important that you don't have it really runny, because our next step is to make the filling. Let me get some of this stuff out of the way. Now, to make your centers for the nipples of Venus, the best thing to use is one of these little small scoops. They're for dropping cookies or things like that. And depending on how big of a scoop you use, you can use 2 spoons as well to make these. Now, depending on how big your scoop is, you should get 18 to 20 centers. Drop them out onto wax paper. And once you get these all scooped out, I'm going to put them in the refrigerator. Whoops. And let them chill for about an hour. While I'm waiting for the centers to chill, I'm going to make up a little bit of the frosting for these. I have 2.5 tablespoons of powdered sugar. And to that, I'm going to add 1 drop, just 1 drop of red food coloring. And a little bit of half and half. You can use milk if you want, but I got half and half right on hand, easiest, so I'm going to use that. And you have to kind of mix this by eye. You want to make this into a thick paste, and it tends to be too much real quick. So I'm dumping it out of the cap. I also have, you can hopefully see sitting right there, a plastic bag with just a tiny bit cut off of the corner. On a totally unrelated note, something I've been considering is starting channel memberships on my channel. I think what I'll do is, for members, have a once or maybe twice a month live stream question and answer session. Hopefully try and answer any questions you have about cast iron. And I'll come up with some other content to fill the time when nobody's asking questions. I'm thinking I'll go with about $5 a month for memberships. That sounds like a pretty decent amount. And I think I need just a tiny bit more, half and half in there. But I want to know what you think. Do you think that'd be something worthwhile and interesting? Like I said, $5 a month is not a whole lot. And it won't be any time soon that I do it, within the next month or so, because I got to figure out how to run a live stream and set some other things up. And like I said, I kind of want to know what you think. And this finally came together the way I want it. So leave a comment on what you think of memberships. Do you think it'd be something you'd be interested in? Something that'd be worthwhile? Maybe as I get things going, I could have guests on. All kinds of things you can do on a live stream. But anyway, there's my paste all made up. And I cut just a tiny bit off the corner of this bag. I'm going to put this in here. Wipe off my spoon. And there's my frosting ready to go. You can do this with a pastry bag too, but there's really not enough there to make it worth your while for a big pastry bag. So the plastic bag with the corner cut off works really nice for this sort of thing. But I'll set that aside until I'm ready for it, and we'll be back when the centers have chilled enough. We're almost to the point where we're going to start coating those insides that we made. I have 12 ounces of white chocolate, and I'm going to set aside a fourth of that, which would be 6 squares. The rest I'm going to chop up and start melting it. You want to melt this at as low of a temperature as you can. That's important because we want the outside to have a nice snappy kind of crispy crunch to it. If you melt your chocolate at too high of a temperature, it'll harden, but it'll still be soft. It won't have that snap to it. I'm just going to put this in a metal dish in a bowl of very hot water. My hot water at home is ridiculously hot, dangerously hot in fact, for small children, but I don't have any around, so I don't really care. But once I get this chopped up, I'll throw it in the bowl and float it in the hot water until it just melts. The temperature we're looking for is about 130 degrees or so. There's quite a bit of science behind it, which I don't really remember, probably never really understood all that well. But this has something to do with chocolate forming crystals as it cools. And different types of crystals form at different temperatures, and the ones that form at the lower temperature tend to be the nice, snappy, crispy, crunchy ones that we're looking for. So now that I got that all chopped up good, get her in the bowl, then we'll get her in the water and get it to melting. That'll take a few minutes, and I'll be back when that is all melted. Alright, we're almost ready to start dipping our nipples in the white chocolate. What I'm going to do now is add the fourth of the white chocolate that I saved out into the melted chocolate. I'm going to stir that in and let it melt. This is what's known as tempering the chocolate. And what that does is it provides seed crystals for the melted chocolate. When it starts to harden again, it provides seed crystals which form more of the crispy, snappy chocolate that we want on the outside of our candy. So you just add back that little bit of chocolate, stir it in until it melts, and I'm going to leave this in a bowl of warm water just to keep it warm, and warm enough that it flows nice off a spoon. I'm going to turn the camera off for just a second, grab my insides, and we'll start covering them. The way I used to coat these was to take one of the centers, put it on a fork, and then spoon the melted chocolate over it and push it off with another fork onto a piece of wax paper. But while these were chilling, I had a brilliant idea. I'm going to put them on a rack and spoon the melted white chocolate over the top directly and not mess around with forks. Now, I've never actually done this before, so I don't know how well it's going to work. Might turn into an unmitigated disaster, but that's half the fun of cooking. Get that off to the side a little more. chocolate flow. I have some wax paper underneath this to catch the overflow. And I'll do a couple of them real quick. I'm sure there's better ways of dipping these and covering them, but I'm not a chocolatier, so I don't know. You're going to want to take your frosting while the chocolate is still soft, and you want to squeeze just a little dop on there. And it blew the side of my bag out. Wow, that ain't good. Let me see here. Just put a little dab on there. If you do this while it's still a little warm, this will stick a lot better. The frosting has a tendency to flake off, and you don't want your nipples falling off. Well, the thing I figured would be a disaster seems to have worked pretty good, and the thing that should have worked is a disaster. But I'll get these covered, and I'll have to make myself a new bag real quick, and I will be back. Once I get these all covered, I'll throw them in the fridge for a while, then I'll come back once they've had a chance to cool off and set up. Okay, these have been chilling in the fridge for about an hour or so. I don't think I'm going to do the rack technique again because they're a bit hard to get off the rack. Also, when you use a couple of forks and a spoon, you can let the extra chocolate drip back into your bowl and reuse it. And I came up about 3 pieces short because when it drips through the rack, I couldn't get it back out. You probably noticed there's fewer of these than when I started. That's because of the ones that came up short and I didn't have enough chocolate to coat them, and because I've eaten some of them. If you have the strength of will, or you've made enough of them, these are best if you leave them in the refrigerator at least overnight, because that'll give a little time for the flavors to come together, and it'll soften up any larger pieces of nut that you may have left from grinding them. Now, I've made prettier ones of these, and they ain't quite perfect, but hey, there ain't no silicone allowed here in Mudbrook. Regardless of what they look like, they are fantastic tasting things. If you make some of these, you'll love them. If you give some of these as a gift and the person opens the box and finds a bunch of these staring back at them, you will definitely make an impression. Anyhow, that's how you make nipples of Venus. Hopefully you can make them a little bit prettier than mine, and I hope you enjoyed the video.